Hey everybody, and welcome to part 2 in my series on step components for the OPXY. This time I'm going to be showing a basic drum beat again, except I'm going to use step components in a little bit of a different way, almost like I'm using them to arrange an introduction to a song. And then I'll show you how I've used some step components to play with some chord progressions and a few other tricks along the way. So let's go ahead and get started by changing our gain, going to the mixer page, hitting M4, and I'm going to just change everything to 75 because that makes it easier for me to level things and make everything easier to hear overall. Then I can make tweaks to that later. I'm going to start off with, let's just make a kind of snare roll, I guess. So I guess the first thing I'll do is I'm going to get that boop kit, copy it, and put it on these first 3 tracks. The first track already has it by default. So we have these 3 tracks are all on the same drum track. I'm going to use 2 as my snare, and let's start off with kind of like a snare roll sort of pattern. Okay, kind of intense, but that's okay. Let's actually... If we wanted to, we could add a couple of multiply 2s, just to add a little bit extra flair. Okay, cool. So that's just going to be our snare intro. And then after 4 bars of this, I want to bring in the kick. So I'm going to do that by using jump. And what I'll do here is I'm going to actually make this whole first page blank. And then I will add some pulses and holds, and we'll talk about that in just 1 second. So I'm going to hold bar, hit plus, go bar, and on the second page, I'm going to add in our kick drum. But what if I want this to last for longer than just 1 bar? Well, I could add in, to each of these steps, I could add in a pulse or a hold 4. And what that's going to do is it's either going to repeat this trigger / step 4 times, or it's going to hold it for a count of 4. But basically what this does is it takes this bar and makes it, instead of 1 measure, it's going to make it 4 measures. So it basically is going to make it so it's like a long delay before it moves to that second page. But I know for a fact that on this second page, it's going to just play these 4 and then go back to the first page, right? So what we can do is we can add to this 30-second step, or the last step on the second page, a jump 1, which is going to take us to the first step on the current page. So it's going to constantly be repeating this section right here, after it gets through this 4 bars of just going slowly. So of course you can do this with different patterns, mute groups, etc. I just think that it's pretty helpful to be able to do a little bit more of arrangement like this just using the step components. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and move to track 3. And this is I'm going to use a very similar technique on. So I'm going to, but let's just start here. Let's just see what we want to do. Okay, so I just said that I didn't want this to play immediately. So what I'll do is I'm going to actually copy this to the second bar. So I'll hit Shift and bar, then I can hit Shift and plus, and now there's pages 1 and 2, or bars 1 and 2, and they both have the same content. But for page 1, I'll just delete all these triggers, and I will do what I did on track 1, except instead of doing a pulse 4 or a hold 4, let's just do hold on this one, I'll do a hold 6. So it's ultimately going to hold this for 6 bars before it moves on to page 2. And like I said, we don't want this to just go right back to the beginning afterwards, so I'm going to have it jump back to 1. And so now we've got the the snare starting off, then after 4 bars it adds in the kick, then after 2 more bars it adds in the hi-hat. Let's listen to it. Okay, cool. So that's kind of like a little build-up, and I just think that's kind of a neat trick. But there's a step component that we can use that is jump 8, and that's going to cause things to basically be muted. But not exactly. They just cause a step to be repeated. So if I put a jump 8 right here, it will never leave this step. The advantage of this is that if I put a jump 8 on a blank step, it just stops the track, and the playhead is just stuck there. So what we can do with that is, let's go to our first track, go to that second bar, and add a third bar here. I'm going to make this jump back to 1 happen, let's say 8, 8, 8. So it's going to play through this 8 times. Does that sound right? I think it's right. Maybe it should be fewer. Maybe it should just be 6 times. Let's just do that. And then on track 3, I'm going to have it just play through 6 times here as well. Or maybe 4 times? I don't know. I'm just messing around now. And I'm going to add, without holding shift, a third bar, which I'll go to. And on this first step, I'll just place a jump 8. And I'm going to do the same exact thing with the kick track. Third track, I'm going to add a jump 8. Okay, so let's listen to this and see what's happening. I'm going to be jumping between these first 3 tracks so we can look at how the sequencer is behaving. So it should just be playing this at first. For the first 4 bars, don't know why I made that choice. And now the kick is about to come in. And it should play this twice through before the hi-hat comes in. So I think it'll stop after this. We can see that this track is also kind of stuck on that page. That's the playhead. There's no note on that step. One quick note though, if we go back to arranger mode here, it's not going to guess how long this pattern actually is with step components. Like, it doesn't include those at all in its calculations. It's just going to think that this is 3 bars because that is the longest track that we have. The longest pattern that we have is 3 bars on the first and third steps, or first and third tracks. So if you see this, it's only counting it as a... Yeah, so it's counting it in terms of 3 bars. Now, the way that you can deal with this is I generally like to use an aux track to control the overall length. I'm partial to, so I hit the aux track button, I pulled up the punch-in effects. I'm partial to the punch-in effects because then I can add these across the entire length of the pattern without having it repeat a bunch. And I think that's just kind of like a helpful thing to have. So what if we wanted this? Let's just change this to track scale 9, which means that each of these steps is worth 1 measure. So if we want that intro to be 12 measures, or 16 like we've got here, we can just have it stay right there. Or we can just use the aux track to define that. So that wasn't quite spot on, but my point is that you're going to have to adjust the track length by using a different track than the tracks you have the step components on, just because they're not going to play through the whole pattern before they move on. Now let's talk about adding these to a track with chords. So let's just go to track 8 and let's pull up, let's do the refelt piano. And this is where we're going to talk about combining pulse and hold. So what we've established is that if I set this track scale to 4, and I add a pulse 2, it will play this for 2 quarter notes in a row before it moves on to the next step. This is true from 2 through 9. 0 is going to play it a random number of times. Okay, enough of that. Hold, similarly, is going to hold it for about that, for as long as we ask it to. For some reason, it sometimes only does half, even if I have length on the bar set to 100. Sometimes it still just does hold it for just half the amount. I don't know what's up with that. It could be an envelope thing, whatever. Anyway, if I combine them, it's going to be a little bit counterintuitive. So if I do a pulse 4 and a hold 4, it's only going to hold this step for 4 counts. It's not going to pulse it or anything like that. However, if I change the pulse to 8, it's going to play it for 4 steps. It's going to hold it for 4 steps, and it's going to do that twice, because 8 divided by 4 is 2. You can think of it however you want. I think of pulse as defining how long it's going to hold it for, and then hold as to how it's going to subdivide that. But that only works when they are divisible by each other. So right here we've got hold 4, pulse 8. And so this is how it's going to work for the rest of it. So let's take that same 8 step, the pulse for 8, and let's divide it into holds of 2. Now the weird part here, you might think that you're just getting the hang of it. The weird part is, what if we keep that hold at 2, but we change the pulse to 3? So 3 is not divisible by 2 as a whole number or anything like that. And so what we're actually going to hear here, weirdly enough, is it's going to be held for a count of 2 and played 3 times. So when they aren't divisible by one another, it's going to take the hold and it's going to multiply it by the pulse. Weird, right? But it can be helpful, especially if you want things to last for a while or if you want to play with different rhythms. So I'm going to add a couple more chords. I'm just going to add a C sharp minor and then a D major. And we're going to play with these, and we're going to be using our pulses and our holds to mess with the rhythm. Maybe we'll even use multiply a little bit. We'll see. I'm going to take a brief break to go ahead and make this sound a little bit better using effects sends and things like that. I'll probably just fast forward through this part, but basically, yeah. Okay, so this is a very, very boring chord progression. The nice part about this is that I can edit the duration of these steps and thus edit the rhythm a little bit without having to edit every single one of them or respace them. So I think that that's a huge part of these functions, is if I want this to be held 3 times, then I might want this to be held for a count of 2. So that's 5 counts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, we'll have to add another one. So let's just add a pulse 2 right there. And let's just hear what this sounds like now. It's probably going to be a very different rhythm, but it's going to add up to 8, so we know that it's going to be still on time. What if instead of pulse 2, we do a pulse 3? Then we get rid of that 3rd step. So it's just going to repeat these 3 steps over and over. And what if we just make it so that the track scale is 2? It's going to change it a bit. So that's, of course, pretty repetitive, but I don't know. I guess I just find that to be pretty helpful as a way of taking maybe a chord progression that you like or maybe a melody that you like and sort of guess and check or doing trial and error with the different ways that you could use it. The last thing I want to show you is going to be just a bit of a weird one. I just want to show some kind of generative or random stuff. This isn't usually what I do, but let's just add a few notes. And I'm going to just change the envelope a bit. And what I'll do is I'm going to make it so that the scale is 2, and after this first part here, after these first 4 steps, I want it to just be going between these 3 notes in a random order. And there's a way to do this. So this step is always going to go forward and play this step, and that's fine. What I might do, though, is I might make it so that it randomly, so I put a skip component 0, it's going to randomly jump 5, jump 1 step forward. So it'll sometimes just go here, other times it's going to jump 1 step forward. This step is going to jump back. And it's always going to do that. And this middle step, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a jump 7, which is going to be jump forward or back. It's going to randomly do that. And what we're going to get is once it gets here, we're going to just get like a random combination of these 3 notes. If we really wanted to, we could just make it so that, for example, let's just make it so that these ones, well, this one plays randomly, right? That isn't as clear as I'd maybe hoped. And let's change the sound a little bit here. Oh, the problem is that it's randomly jumping all the way ahead here. So I'm just going to actually copy that step and just have it go again. If we want to get really weird, let's add a random multiply. This is probably going to sound awful, but let's give it a try. And let's just top this off by making it so that those 2 only play the first of every 2 times. Or maybe I'll make it so that this one right here, let's make that play, let's make it play the first 2 of every 3 times. Then we'll have this one just play, yeah, the first of every 2nd time. So we're still just having these 4 steps, and it's making that whole kind of generative melody. We could mix it up even more if we wanted. Let's randomize it, which I haven't really talked about yet, but let's just see what happens here. Let's add some portamento to make it sound especially weird. Okay, that sounds pretty gnarly. So this was chaotic, And that brings me back to my original point, which was that I don't use this many step components on patterns unless I'm just playing around and just having fun. If I'm actually trying to make a song or something, I use step components in a very intentional way. And that intention might just be like, okay, I want to add some variation or chaos in this spot. But I don't often have every track have multiple step components and stuff like that. That's just because it's not really, I find that kind of tiresome. I do find it fun to play with and to use to save space, but overall I use them just kind of as needed. Regardless, I hope that this video helped you. Please let me know if you have any questions. Please feel free to sign up for my Patreon, and I will see you next time. Thank you for watching.